Okay, I'm Edward Marcus and I was born in Dublin and my date of birth would be the 3rd of April 1945, which makes me 77 and 3/4. When Stratford opened, we transferred into Stratford on the very first day when Stratford was in Ternier Road East, which is now called Argos House. I wasn't very, as I say, academic, and if any reason at all to get out of school, I would find a reason. And the first headmaster we had was a guy called Mr. Shields. The next one was a guy called Green, Mr. Green, and he had a dog called Pookie. It was a sort of a poodle, big poodle type thing. And he'd bring it into school in the morning and he'd say, "Who wants to take the dog for a walk?" I was there first, and out we'd go, and you could spend half the day out with the dog, walking him around. So that suited me fine. And later on, I think I took over the running of the tuck shop, or at least we started it. I started with Alec Feldman, and the tuck shop was I don't know. Under the hall, in the basement, became a theatre then.
Yeah.
And but before that, there was a room in the basement, a separate room, and we divided it into two. And the front half was the tuck shop, which we had a window which we served out of, and the back half became a gambling den. And we had a roulette wheel and a room for betting for horses, and we had an insurance scheme. If you got caned, you paid sixpence a week, and if you got caned, you got a lump sum back. So it was an interesting time. And then, of course, running the tuck shop, we had a guy came, Mr. Barber, he was called. He had a van. He wholesaled the food or the sweets and the chocolates and whatever from the van, and it meant I could tell him when to come, what classes I wanted to get out of, so that he would drive up and I'd put my hand up and say, "I have to go out, the van is outside, I have to go down," and they'd let me go, you know. So I didn't learn very much academically in Stratford, but that was the time, you know, Stratford was finding its feet. I went to Russia, I forgot about that.
What?
We went for to bring products. The Jews in Russia, they weren't allowed to practice their religion, and I went with Adrian Gordon, and we brought a load of products. A lot of people went over time, but you brought something. What we brought there was parts of a copying machine, and what they wanted to do was to build a huge printing press. And you obviously couldn't bring it in as a printing, but everybody brought a part, and then they assembled it, because you could get through customs. They didn't know what it was. Somebody put it together there over time, and then they were able to print their own Hebrew books or magazines or pamphlets.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was. But it was a time when you went in as a tourist.
Was it dangerous in any way?
Well,
Was like any risk involved?
oh, there was. You could be arrested bringing in stuff. I mean, we brought in cameras. If you brought in a camera, like a quality camera, you had to bring it back out again. But when you went through customs and you declared it, you only declared it as a camera. And you'd leave the £1,000 camera behind, and you'd bring out a Kodak Brownie or something. You know, so you'd have a camera going back out. We were instructed by Mossad. Guy came over and instructed you how to handle yourself there. We had to go by train. We went as a tourist with a group who didn't know anything. They were just a group you joined. But they'd go off on a tour and you'd pretend you were sick, so you couldn't go that day, and then you'd go off. And there was an awful lot of Dublin people went on it. They told you not to talk in your room, that it would be bugged, and you know, all the usual stuff. Because, I mean, you were a spy, really, in a sense. I played the ukulele, so we go to groups. I play in a group that we go to charity things. We do the hospice in Harold's Cross. We play once a month bout, and we go to the remedial clinic in Dunleary, and we play there, and we play in a lot of old homes, you know, for old folks, which is a strange thing, because if you go into somewhere where there's people with dementia, shall we say, and you start to play music, they may not even know their own names or who you are, but they remember the words of songs, which is the strangest. You play a song and you can see them coming alive and singing with you. You get a feeling you're doing some good. You're entertaining them for a couple of hours in the afternoon, because other than that, they're just sitting around, you know. It's a group called Good Vibes, and they're actually up near the Spa Well. We play in the football club up there every Wednesday, and then we rehearse, if you like, and play. I was with another group up in Educate Together in Rathgar, but they sort of got a bit more professional. I wasn't up to it, you know. So this group is a little bit more casual. There's my object.
Your name?
Andrew Wolfe,
What is your date of birth?
the 9th of the 2nd, 1942,
What is your place of birth?
Dublin, Hatch Street.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a retired dentist. Well, I was born in Dublin to a family that was, my father was a dentist, and he was the first in his family to have a professional career. He lived in the South Circular Road, and latterly in Brighton Road in Rathgar, and he was the first of 7 dentists within the family. So I followed in his footsteps. It seemed that the natural thing to do, and I entered the College of Surgeons in 1958. I qualified in 1964 in dentistry. I went to Rathgar National School. I quite liked it, but I got bullied. And I went from there, when I was 10, to a school in Brighton Road in Rathgar called Glenart. And myself and Stuart Barling were the first 2 Jewish boys in the school. At that time, there were only 4 boys in the school. 2 years later, there were 16 Jewish boys in it. And we took prayers every morning. We did the Shema and the Shemon Esrei. And it was a lovely school. We played hockey against Norfolk College, the girls' school, in Bushy Park. And we played cricket. And then I went to high school.
Yeah, you went to...
In high school, there were only two Jewish boys, myself and Derek Wine, in 3rd year. So in 3rd year, we played cricket, which was one of the games we did, and rugby and in high school. However, I was not allowed play, and yet I was playing cricket in Maccabi.
You weren't allowed to play in the school?
No.
Why was that?
I didn't really understand why, because I was playing against the kids that were in the same class in high school, but now I was playing against them in Maccabi. Now I understand it better. There was discrimination. It was nothing else. And by the time I left high school, there were 60 Jewish kids in the junior school.
It's a particular experience, the Maccabi experience. Could you
Fantastic.
talk to me about your experience of Maccabi and your involvement?
It was a magical place. It really was. It was. There must have been 800-900 teenagers in the community at that stage. And the Maccabi was the center of basically all our lives. Whether it was in the drama, the boxing, the cricket, the soccer, the rugby, the tennis, it was a wonderful place. And that was all through our teenage years and even our early married years. And it was sad to see it coming to an end. The changes have gone from a three-show, vibrant community to a diminishing community with a history. But there is also a new community slowly developing. And I think that's reflected in Stratford, very much so in Stratford. When I remember the days, there were down to two or three pupils there, Jewish pupils, and now what, you've got 80 plus? I'm a traditionalist. I love my religion. But I also recognize some of the changes that inevitably have occurred or are occurring within our religion. The traditional aspects of it, the festivals, and also what COVID has changed. And COVID has changed very dramatically for me, because we started within the community the Zoom programs. But out of that developed, when Bloomfield closed, we lost our minion. And because of that, we started a Zoom minion. Now that has become a regular feature. And it's not only national, it's now international. So we have people from Israel, we've had people from America, we've had people from mainly expats. But it has also helped the people who are unable to go to show. So there are a regular 35 people, of which 6 or 7 are people confined to their house or unable to travel, who can't get to show. Well, it's a photograph, but the caption on it says, "Who's been in a mouth like this?" And the 2 people in it are Joe Dolan,
who's a famous
from Mullingar,
singer, yeah.
and his statue stands in the square in Mullingar today. And that's need no real introduction, but there you go. Michael Jackson.
Did you pick that as your object? What is that? How is
Well, it represents the level of quality or standard of dentistry that I was able to achieve through being in Dublin, and it was my privilege to look after them. It really was a privilege. And they were good friends. And they were exciting times.
My name is Heather Abrahamson.
When were you born?
I was born in Dublin,
What year were you born?
1950.
What was your profession?
I have worked as a teacher in adult education and in heritage work as a guide.
What was it that you said yes to, in terms of sharing your story, and why it might be of value to you to do so?
Well, firstly, when I was asked, I just felt that is a very good project, and I thought it's wonderful for young people in school to be interested to find out about an older generation and how their lives progressed. When somebody wants to listen to you, you feel very valued, even though I know that the people filming me and interviewing me today are not going to go around remembering me. But we all want to be heard. And the people we live with often don't listen to us because they're fed up with us. It's very nice to come along and have a whole lot of people listening to you who are only learning about you for the first time, because, of course, we all carry a whole story with us wherever we go. But mostly, nobody hears that story because we're all too caught up in the day-to-day. The world I come from was a pre-technology world, so it was a more personal interaction with people and more cut off from people who lived far away. Well, there were just us two sisters, so we were a small family. We lived in what is now an enormous suburb of Dublin, Rathfarnham, but in the 1950s it was small. We lived at the edge of Rathfarnham village, and beyond it you rapidly got into the countryside. We went to the local village school, a one-teacher school, armed with a cane. So already you're thinking of a very different sort of environment. But it was still a good school, and we had friends there. It wasn't a cruel place. And then we moved on to secondary school. I went to Alexandra School, which at the time was near Stephen's Green on Earlsford Terrace. I've sometimes talked to school groups about Jewish life, and I think what I do is I tell it exactly as I felt it. The Jewish calendar does put a shape on your years, your months, your week, and your life. So our lives were very mapped out by, as in all religions, the festivals and the calendar. And they would have been times for family gatherings, and I certainly relished that growing up. So this is a book that an American cousin of my mum's brought for me. She brought, I must have been about 8. This cousin came over from the States, and she brought this book called Famous Paintings for me, and she bought a book about ballet for my sister, which now I feel is rather uncanny, because Jill, my sister, loved ballet and had ballet pictures up in her room, and I developed this love for art galleries and looking at paintings. So it explains very clearly about each painting. And the one I'd like to show you is the famous, iconic Mona Lisa in the Louvre in Paris. And I yearned and yearned to see the real thing. And I love lingering on the paintings. And I still am a great visitor to galleries. And it all began with that book when I was about 8. So that's why it's so special for me.
And you've had it since you're 8. What aspect of you does this book represent?
Being lifted away from the mundane to lives that are lived by other people in other times, and the genius of people pre-technology and pre-automation of any kind. Even, like, I love classical music. If you just think of the output of somebody like Mozart, writing everything by hand, all of this arts, crafts, skills of writing and communication, it just lifts me out of the present into the past and the talents of people down through the centuries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the other thing is, family history and grandparents. They were very big
So
in
tell
my
me
life.
about that, tell me about that.
Well, my granddad lived with us, my mother's dad, after Grandma died. And I think it was hard for my mother at times, even though he was a lovely, lovely, non-interfering person. But I look back with yearning now. I think everybody, that's why this project is so important. I think everybody of my age looks back and wished we'd asked our grandparents more questions.
You said that you wished you could ask your grandparents questions. Is there one question in particular you would have asked them?
I think maybe I'd say two, if I could. I would ask them what their lives were really like in the shtetls in Lithuania. I've seen photographs, but we can have no real concept of day-to-day life. And then there's another really sad question. I'd like to know who they left behind. They are totally nameless people to me.
It's Leonard Cron. I was born in London. Date of birth was 1922. And I eventually, after going into doing woodwork and carpentry, I went into tailoring and was with my father. We had a fairly large family. When I was 16, 1938, a year before the last war, we moved to Ireland because I had an uncle here, and he was working for a factory which produced ladies' garments. And in those days, they had a lot of men working more than women. And the whole family then came over here. My father came first, and we unfortunately had a phone, and trade wasn't good really in England, so he was only too glad to come over here and work. And I got a job as well on the machines, and I worked there for quite a while. And then when I got a little bit older and working there, I left and I went in with my father. We opened our own factory, and we employed quite a few women there and a few men, and we made ladies' and children's garments, and things were very, very good. I arrived here on a Sunday. I came on a ship called the Maud, which had no stabilizers, and it was a very rocky road coming over, I can tell you. My mum had given me a drop of whiskey in a bottle, and she said, if you feel sick going over, just take a drop of this. And I took that, and I was as sick as a dog. I remember talking to a friend of mine called Cyril Watson later, and I asked him about it. He said, that's the worst thing you could have ever taken. I got married youngish. I was only about 22. My wife was only about 18, and she was a lovely lady, and we had 3 lovely children. She passed unexpectedly. We were in Spain, and she went into the water to swim, the same as me, in Spain, and unfortunately the waters were contaminated, and she happened to swallow it, and she lived only until the age 46. I married again after 3 years, and this lady was called Sybil, and unfortunately she died only last year, she got Alzheimer's. I'm not over religious, but I'm Orthodox, and I keep all the holidays, and they keep all the holidays. So I go to the synagogue. Alan takes me, as I have no car. And anyway, I sit next to him, or he sits next to me in the synagogue. I can't do everything, but I do what I can for Yiddishkeit. I love it. Yes, it's great. And they all follow suit, all my family, yeah. Joys over the years was when I was at dances. I loved dancing. We had a slow waltz, we had a slow foxtrot, we had a quick step, all of them, all gone. and I danced in the Greenville Hall off the South Circular Road, and it was wonderful whenever there was dances there. Minda Myers, a lady, would play the piano. She had a saxophonist playing, and it was really great. I enjoyed that very much.
And would you go with your wife at the time? Was it?
No, I wasn't married at the time.
Oh.
Yes.
You went as a singleton.
A single, and then when I married, we'd go to dances in the Gresham. We'd go to, I think we were once in Cleary's. We were tea dances in town as well. There was tea dances, and it was really lovely, yes.
These shears, are these old ones or are these more recent ones?
No, they're old ones that I used. I went to a technical school and learned about cutting, and I designed and made garments for ladies in particular, but also for children. I went on a holiday once to France, and while I was there, I saw in a shop an anorak. Now, in Ireland, I don't know about England, but in Ireland, they didn't have anoraks. So I brought this anorak home, and from seeing that one simple anorak, I designed other anoraks. Zips were very difficult to get, but I managed to import them, and I got zips. I got not alone metal zips, I got plastic zips, which were wider, and I made anoraks that were reversible. I sold them to Elvery's, which is a big firm here, and I sold them to Arnott's, big firm here. I had a brand name called Skier for them, and for the anoraks in particular.
So this represents for you.
It represents that to me.
A lifetime of work and
of
industry
work,
and
yes, indeed.
challenges and
Designs,
the
making things,
creativity,
yes.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Did you have any sense that this was a particularly Jewish profession? Was there a sense for you that this was something handed down, a tradition?
All the clothing areas, I think it was a Jewish tradition. My grandfather was in from one of the countries, yes, foreign country, and he started all off. They had a large house, which I said I was born in 116 Richmond Road, and they had the top 2 floors, which were producing garments with treadle machines. I crawled up, I was only about 3 or 4 years old, upstairs to where they were cutting, and they hadn't got cutting machines in those days. They had a line, an opening in the table, and they'd move the cloth about instead of moving the knife about, and it would come through the table. And being a young child, my grandfather was working away, cutting away, and I went to grab the knife, and he saw me in time. Thank goodness, or I wouldn't be here.
Is there a way of life or a past that you have a sentimental view of, or that you miss, or that the way it was, you know?
I miss the way it was, of course I do. But I have to carry on. And I'm amazed that I'm even reaching this great age. What can I do but just carry on and do the best I can, particularly when my children are looking after me. It's a great help. Listen, it's wonderful that at this age of 106 months into the 101, that I'm out and about, I'm not in a home, I don't want to go in a home, and I hope it never happens. I'd rather die, to be honest with you. And that the interest that my children take in me and look after me, it's so great, it's unbelievable to me that I've reached this age, but I carry on as far as I can. And I mean, as you see, I'm even walking without a walking stick around here, although I do need it when I go out. But yes, people do say I'm amazing, and I hope they're right.
Yeah.
Rini Borshard,
And your date of birth?
the 25th of the 5th, 1927.
And the place of birth?
Glasgow, Scotland.
And your occupation through your life, if any?
Glover. We married in December 47. I came in 48. My husband was already settled here. They had no war. They had wonderful conditions compared to us. I remember somebody showing me or passing at a table a bowl of whipped cream. It was something I could barely remember from before the war. The contrast of life here was, to me, opulent because of the lack of shortages of anything. People weren't welcoming to, I mean, the Irish community wasn't welcoming to Jews anyway, but people weren't welcoming to strangers. You know, somebody Scottish was from another world. And one still has the feeling of being a blow-in.
So do you feel Irish or do you feel Scottish in your bones, in your being?
Neither, really. I just feel Jewish, although I'm not religious. I don't have national loyalties. I think there is a lot of racism today, and I think that people feel that people are coming and getting jobs and starting industries and that, but there's plenty of room for everybody. No, I think that when you look at the world today and what nationalism has done, I don't think it's a good idea to be a nationalist of any country. And I take a great pride in being Jewish, whereas when I was young, people would almost hide the fact that they were Jewish, as opposed to nowadays, where it's just a fact of life, but not hidden. One doesn't, as a Jew, belong in the same full sense to most countries. My mother was on refugee committee. It must have been about 1938, or 37 even, I'm not sure. But the children used to be brought in batches from the railway station, and they came to our house, and we had a thing called tea bread, which is peculiar to Scotland. It's not sweet, but not savoury either. And they used to have these. And then they had their white socks exchanged. The reason that was given was that Glasgow in those days was a very dirty town, and they couldn't keep white clean. But in point of fact, it was pointed out to people that the children with the white socks were the German children. Not that they were Jewish, but that they were the German children. And anything German was anathema. So much so, I was at a very large school, and nobody would even learn the language. The difference in those children from different towns, different types of background, that maybe I wasn't sympathetic enough, but I didn't want to hear what we had at home from them. I don't think it was hardness. Maybe it was an awkwardness of a child. I have a Ukrainian girl living with me at the moment, and this brought back very vividly all the contacts that I had growing up with mainly German refugee But of course, Lucy is an adult. She's lived a wide life already. I mean, these children were little school children of my own age, more or less. My son was looking through old papers, and we're a family of hoarders, generations of things, you know. And among the things, we found a couple of letters addressed to me from a refugee boy who had been in a hostel in Glasgow. Apparently, I was going to meet him somewhere, and my mother took ill, and I was so upset I wouldn't go. And my father had gone into town to tell this boy, and this boy in later life wrote to me from America and mentioned, so it shows that it touched him very much, the attitude of an Englishman, in that there must have been many people who wouldn't have bothered with him. That's why I held on to these, because I thought it was a nice gesture. My father was a kind man. He was very, very good with young people. And young people always liked him.
My name is David Ross. I am a retired consultant. I'm very privileged to have been a member of a family that came through the ghettos maybe 100 odd years ago from various parts of Europe, Poland, Vilna, Romania actually as well. And they came, obviously they were fleeing from oppression. My father's parents came to live here from England. My grandfather, his name was Schenkman, and when he came here, he arrived by boat into Rosslare, and he told us the story that the customs or the immigration people couldn't pronounce his name, and he assumed the name of Ross, which is how we ended up with the family name Ross. My maternal grandparents lived in Manchester and stayed in Manchester. They were very frum. And my mother always tells us the stories about their Friday nights and they're killing the chickens in the back garden. And I could say that I was very much influenced by my grandparents, especially because they were very hardworking people. They didn't chase wealth. They weren't wealthy people, but they were hardworking people, honest people. And I think through them, through my own parents, they gave me that. I attended all the Jewish schools, that's Zion schools, National School and Stratford. And overall the experience was good, very good. And where I met many lifelong friends from that time. With many of the people I went to school with, we formed a little band in school. We were called the Brothers Pride, so called because one of our group liked Mother's Pride bread, so we became Brothers Pride. We were all also in Scouts, and the Scout Master at the time decided to run a concert in the JACI by the Scout group. And we were commissioned as the band to play the musical interval. And we were awful. And the following day, there was complaints sent into the newspapers about the awful sound that the band made in the concert. So it wasn't very encouraging. And yeah, so we we had that little band, and that's kind of where I got my love of music. I would have loved to have been a professional musician rather than an engineer. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy being an engineer and my working life, but my passion would have been music. Our son, our lovely boy, he's adopted, and he was the main reason that I became more religious. I was never religious in that way, and he was the reason, because his mother wasn't Jewish, and we had to make a decision whether to convert him to Judaism or not. And we decided to do that because we were living in a community and we wanted to give him every opportunity. So the conversion process is quite complex. It took probably 2.5 years. So we kind of enjoyed the lifestyle. It's a different lifestyle, obviously. It's very restrictive in many ways, but it's very beautiful in a lot of ways. It's very family oriented. I would say I kept it up for about 20 odd years. I suppose my greatest joy now is that I've been with Tricia now for 20 odd years, and we have shared the most amazing time together. You know, we come from completely different backgrounds, as you can see, and we respect each other's backgrounds very much. And I think that's given me a much broader, richer view of life. I have there a watch, a pocket watch, and that this pocket watch was given to me by my grandfather when he died. So it has to be the guts of 100 years old, I suppose. I loved my grandfather, and I used to spend, I'd say, 3-4 times a week cycling over there, spending time with him and my grandmother. And this kind of just brings it all back to me, you know?
You hold that and you're
Yeah.
holding a piece of him.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What was his name, please?
Jack.
Jack. Okay, so.
Again, these are candlesticks that came from Poland with my mother's mother. She brought them when she was 11. Obviously she came with her mother, but my mum has no recollection of her grandparents, which is amazing. So somehow she got to England when she was 11, and these came. And they're kind of a symbol to me of all the family who left Eastern Europe during very hard times. And these have been in the family. And this is what kind of keeps me grounded.
Even as you're holding
Yeah.
them, you can feel the
Yeah.
strength of that rooting for you. Beautiful.
Yep.
Take a moment.
So this is part of the Shabbat service, okay? And it comes at the end of what they call the beginning of the service, the beginning of Chakras, before you go into the main part of the service. Shachinat moram v'kodesh shema v'yishorim tisalol u'v'divrei tzadikim tisborach u'v'lashan chasidim tisramam u'v'kerev kadashim tiskatosh.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.